The old double click mouse button, mic button. Jerry, how are you?
Hey, good morning. A bit tired, didn't sleep too well, but surviving.
Well, that's good to hear that you're surviving.
Yep.
Yeah, this is a time of year for not sleeping too well. Not
Yeah,
only
and then,
get,
it's just springtime. I'm a winter guy, so, I don't know, kind of feeling bit down in that sense that snow might be melting, etc., etc.
no more skiing, huh?
Well, this week there's, some snow, and the season here is until end of April, so, but the last few weeks normally they're a bit slushy, especially in the
Hmm.
afternoon.
Yeah, I remember those days. Get out there on the snowshoes and tread out to try and find some good snow to do some cross country skiing.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Hello, everyone. How are you?
Fine, Jane, how are you?
Good, good. It's running quite late here in Japan. We're at 1:30 a.m. I can report that tomorrow is quiet so far.
Ah, good.
And yeah, no, all is well. So I see we have three continents represented so far, with just four people. Not a bad accomplishment. How are things in Texas going, Chris?
Springtime, pollen, lots of storms. What else? Tornadoes, hail.
Oh,
Yeah, spring is never fun here, but today
Yeah.
is beautiful, so I can't complain about today.
Yeah, if I recall correctly, you live in an area where you have a reasonably nice place to chill out, look at outside and enjoy the world.
Yeah, this is the first time in my life that I can recall where I've actually had a window in my office.
Oh my goodness.
so you've been in basement, before, or
Yeah, yeah, basement, upstairs. Yeah, it was all the same. You couldn't tell. You go to
yeah.
work in the dark and you'd come home in the dark. So it was like being a turnip.
So Chris is probably working in a deep bunker somewhere in Area 51 doing cool stuff that he'll never tell us about.
With aliens.
No, actually, I'm sitting in my office looking out the window at the birds buzzing around on the buds on the bushes.
The thing I'm waiting for here is the dragonflies. As summer hits, we get blue dragonflies, and as fall arrives, we get the red ones. And it's been 15 years, and I still find it both bizarre and enjoyable. Coming from Ireland, we don't really do dragonflies. So
Yeah,
Japan has its own treats.
yeah, yeah. When I was growing up, we had great big dragonflies. We had green ones and gold ones and red ones. Yeah, it was. They're quite magnificent little bugs, big bugs.
There was a big turnaround in Europe a while back, which was when we saw a lot of people shifting from quite harsh uh, sprays on the crops to very targeted sprays instead. And there was a real rebound of wildlife. Suddenly there were more bees everywhere. We had more butterflies. And it was just lovely to see because when I was a kid, there was a lot, and then there was this big decline, and now suddenly it's a bounce back. And around spring and summer, the air is just full of noise and color. It's quite cute.
Yeah, I suppose you'll be enjoying the cherry blossoms here soon.
Oh yeah, that's right. 1 month, 1 month to go.
So are you celebrating Hanabi there?
If I'm if I'm here, yeah,
Yeah.
that's a pretty big thing in my town, and you'll find people having little parties under the cherry blossom in the parks and so on. Traditionally, it's a picnic with sake. It's a big deal. It's a big deal still.
And people
Yeah.
go there early morning to reserve the spot, or
Yeah, you have to get in pretty
yeah.
early. It does get busy. There's only 3 days or 4 days of good cherry blossom in each geographic location, so there's not much party time. Uh, we have a weather forecast for cherry blossoms here in Japan going from the south to the north because the place is, 3,000 kilometers long. Uh, so, you have these daily updates. Yeah, your cherry blossoms will be between the 9th and 11th of April. And then suddenly, oh no, it's changed. It's day by day. It's a bit like NORAD tracking Santa. It's one of those things. Right, let's dive in and do the formal bit. So this is the monthly meeting North America and Europe, and this will be the last one in the North America and Europe cycle. We currently do North America and Europe and Asia, so 2 meetings a month. We're going to shift to a North America Asia and keep the Europe Asia meeting. There's mainly one reason for that. We don't have a regular host of this meeting except me, and it's the middle of the night for me. So we're going to do North America, Asia, and Europe, Asia starting next month. It's something we socialized in January and February, and we've received no negative comments on that. Before we formally kick off the meeting, the antitrust policy notice, the full antitrust policy on the website. And if you're from a member company, you can ask any questions of our counsel, Andy Updegrove. If you're not from a member company, you can ask any questions of your own counsel. Our agenda today is pretty straightforward. The end of the freeze period is coming for proposed updates to our ISO standards. We're going to have a board strategy meeting in a couple of days in Napa. We're going to look at some of the market reaction to our maturity modeling. We're going to talk about major tooling and automation stuff happening in April. And we're going to have a little bit of space here for people to share thoughts on whether OpenChain should explore new standards in the future. In other words, snapshot of our current situation and plenty of room to provide your thoughts and comments. Let's do the administrative thing first, the freeze period. I think everyone on this call knows very well what's going on here. We spent 2 years making proposed updates to our ISO standards. We had a 6-month common period, and we had a 3-month freeze period start on December 20th. That ends March 20th. When the freeze period is done, what happens is the community-derived proposed updates to the ISO standards are handed off to our steering committee. The steering committee is made up of the OpenChain board members, and also with a vote is the chair of the spec working group. So that's Chris. The steering committee will have a formal look at the proposed updates and will make a formal decision about them at their next meeting. Their next meeting will be June 25th. That's going to happen beside Open Source Summit North America. The invite for that steering committee meeting will go out in the next few days. It's being prepared by our project manager. And not only will the board members and Chris be invited to that, the steering committee meeting will be open for dial-in for everyone to see what the discussion is like as well. And that's where you'll get the decision. What's going to happen next? Does the steering committee accept the proposed updates as is? If yes, when do they want to do those updates? Do they have revisions, etc., etc.? We'll find out formally in June. In the 3 months before their meeting, so in other words, from the rest of March into April into May, there'll be a chance for the steering committee to bounce back to us with any questions and so on to help clarify their thinking. Now, talking about clarifying thinking, the board strategy session, that's on the 17th of March, it's held during the LF Member Summit. It's going to go 1 until 4 p.m. in Napa. And basically, the board is going to have an informal chat. They're not making decisions, they're just taking a few hours to talk through the topic of future standards. They're going to have a brainstorm and consider what ifs. So, for example, we're currently building in the AI work group an AI bill of material compliance guide for the supply chain. What if that becomes really popular? Do we want to move that guide into being a specification? If so, why? If no, why? So it'll be like a strength, weakness, opportunity, threat analysis. Same deal. Telco work group released an SBOM quality guide for the telco industry. SBOM study group is looking at making that cross-industry, cross-format. So the telco one is for telco, it's using SPDX. But the SBOM study group is thinking, what if we had something that could work for all industries in any format, catching SBOM quality questions like what do I need from my suppliers, regardless of format, if I'm doing license compliance? What do I need if I'm meeting NTIA requirements? What do I need if I'm meeting CRA requirements? So if they proceed to build that guide and that becomes a popular market solution, is a what if that that guide could also in the future become a specification? Board will talk about it. Now we're going to open up at the end of this call the details of future standards, expanding our family for your conversation. Just what I wanted to stop and do here was say the board's going to be talking about this topic, brainstorming it. And while they're brainstorming, is there anything else that you'd like them to discuss? They'll have 3 hours, and it's rare for the board to have that much time to just chat through something without needing to make multiple decisions. Now, there's no need to send them something, but if you do have something, it's a great time to raise it.
Maybe another topic, Shane, like, is there a document where one can easily see all the changes from 2.1 to 3.0, for example, on 5230?
Oh, okay. So a red line of it.
Yeah.
At the moment, we don't have a red line, but certainly I can work on producing that. So what we have is we've purely stored it on GitHub.
Yeah, because there's
And
MDs. Yeah, I know.
yeah, yeah. So yeah, we don't have a red line, just a comparison can be done on GitHub, but I can definitely produce a red line reference document. Yep.
Yeah, because it's been, I don't know how many months or years we've been kind of doing changes one by one,
Mhm.
and it's difficult to remember that, okay, what was the change, and then going back and forth between the two documents, it's a bit difficult to spot all the
Sure.
changes.
Are
What I'll
you
look at,
are
oh,
you
sorry.
talking about, sorry, are you talking about the difference between the two different approaches to the SBOM quality guides?
No, I like kind of like step back because there's the board meeting checking the changes of the specifications, and to do
Okay, so this
that,
is
the red
updates.
line would be easier.
Right, so this is for the updates to the ISO standards that we're
Okay.
proposing. And okay, yeah. So for this, sure, I can do a red line document on that. We had on previous slides a few red lines of changes. Actually, we haven't a huge amount of changes, but I'll explicitly make kind of a Word document to do this.
I don't know if there's like some comparison tool for the MD files, because that could
Oh
be
yeah,
another
yeah,
option.
GitHub can do that, but
Yeah, yeah,
it's
yeah.
kind of, yeah.
So that could be,
It's,
one way to do it.
Yeah,
right.
something like Beyond Compare.
Yeah. Okie
So
dokie.
would you do that for both 5320 and 18974?
Yep, I'm gonna do that. That'll be an action item. And I'll have this kind of redlined even printable document ready very soon.
Okay. The other thing that I was thinking might be a good idea is to start looking at what are the differences between the SBOM guides, and do they
Right.
diverge from each other? Are they really compatible or not compatible? So it'd be interesting to look at.
Right, because there we have the Telco SBOM quality guide and
Hmm.
the AI bill of material compliance guide. So comparative analysis, what are the similarities? What are the differences? And I guess the unspoken question there is, and it comes from our last call, if there's a lot of similarities, could they be the same guide?
Yeah.
Correct.
And now,
Uh,
Shane, if you're editing, change the PST to PDT in the first bullet point.
Oh yeah, the timing. America, please stop using daylight saving time.
we're working on it.
I don't know when, because in EU there was the decision to stop doing the daylight savings, and it's been stuck for many years now. I don't know what's going on with that.
Yeah, I grew up with it in Ireland and I was so used to it, but then I came to Japan and I realized life is so much better when you don't have a whole planet break twice a year.
Yeah,
Hmm. I agree when I wake up in the morning. Say, why the heck did we have to jump forward?
Well, I have corrected it. It's PDT,
Yeah,
daytime.
okay.
All right, good. So the comparative analysis of AI bomb compliance guide and telco guide, I'm going to put that on the table as a strategy discussion point.
Yeah, I think that it would be a good one because I've been having some rather lengthy discussions with the ISO IEC AI folks about what should be in a bomb and what shouldn't be in a bomb. And they have complete lack of, I'll say, regard for uh, intellectual property, let's say. They don't e-
Uh,
they don't they don't even want to put it in their specifications.
Interesting.
Yeah. So I'm elevating that up a level within ISO leadership to see if that's really their position as well. Hmm.
It's fascinating that, yeah, that's good to be elevated. I mean, I suppose one thing that comes up is that let's say Telco has done a quality guide, AI is looking at a compliance guide, and we have this new discussion about cross-industry, cross-format. What is it that you need your suppliers to give you, regardless of, is it a Cyclone format? Is it SPDX? Is it something else? What is it you need? And perhaps as we do this, we can say that people continue with their stuff, like the AI work group could continue working out what they need, Telco can continue working out what they need, but maybe we could consolidate this and capture it. And I just had a discussion with the Open Mainframe project. It's another part of LF. And they were going to essentially do the same run that Telco did, to sit down and say, as a telco industry, what is it that we need off our suppliers to meet legal requirement X, let's say IP licensing. Requirement B, let's say corporate regulatory requirements. And yeah, they're going to probably run through that and do their thing. But even if people do their thing, maybe we can consolidate. So let's get the board talking about that. Right. So I think we have noise coming in. So we have Viral. I think you might need to mute yourself. We've got some background noise coming in from you. Thank you. Right. So to clarify, here's what we got. I'm going to ask the strategy subcommittee meeting to look at a comparative analysis between the AI bomb compliance stuff, telco SBOM quality, and to think about cross-industry, cross-format if we're looking at bill of material quality for compliance and regulatory. Can we just make one big approach and then people can choose their flavor for their industry or regulatory requirement as they go? Is that a good summary of the ask?
I think so, yes. It's like I tried to explain to the AI folks is that regardless of whether or not they like it, AI software is software.
Yep.
And so everybody that's producing software is developing it in the same environments, probably using some or many of the same tools. And so, why is it different?
Right.
Because we don't address the hardware that goes with the GPUs. We don't address the hardware that goes with the fiber to copper uh, transceivers for telco. The hardware just doesn't play a part in these SBOMs. Although you can get a bill of material for your hardware because we have to produce them with our products. So
Yeah.
it's an interesting subject to discuss.
It truly is. It truly is. And, one thing that strikes me, because I talked with the open mainframe team this week. And telco went through this cycle of looking at the telco industry and came to the conclusion, well, it's pretty much what everyone needs. And probably mainframe will do the same thing. And ultimately AI as well. So it seems like a life cycle thing that an industry or an area thinks maybe I'm special. And then it goes through a cycle of examining that and comes to the conclusion, I'm not special. It's the same approach. And that seems to be a life cycle thing as we look at the multi-decades we've spent in this area.
Yeah, it's
Right.
like I tried to remind them, even though their software is doing something entirely different than a lot of the old software does, and it brings it to a new level. Software is still software, and I've been looking at AI software for 20 plus years, and to me, it's no new thing. I think AI does some pretty magical stuff most of most of the time, what you expect out of it. But yeah,
Yeah. And picking randomly at an illustration for some people on the call. Here's a cool one, and this is just saying most AI is predictive analysis, and it's responsive to what's going on and predicting what's coming next. We've seen that type of predictive analysis in play for decades without it necessarily being called AI. One example is the Eurofighter Typhoon. It's an inherently unstable airframe, and it makes about 1,000 calculations a second to stay in the air. So, that's an example of a multi-decade old AI software in play. And in the end, that's just code. Right. Capability modeling. I've been excited about this, and I realize I'm excited about one of the most boring topics in the world, which is how do you continually improve something like process management? But the reason I'm excited is because the capability model is essentially public domain, and you don't see that a lot. So our capability model has been out for, well, gosh, about 2 months now. And R1 is focused on license compliance. How does an organization level up if they're using our ISO standard from getting started to getting really good to becoming very, very good at managing license compliance? And it seems from the gentle but positive market reaction that we'll explore possibly two things next. One, coverage for our security standard. which is in market and seeing increased adoption. And two, possibly collaboration with the Chaos Project around metrics. Is everyone here familiar with the Chaos Project? Just double checking. Because
Yep.
not every, yeah. I'll throw it up on the screen for fun, just in case. Chaos is yet another sister project of ours in the Linux Foundation. Yari pointed out the first wave of AI was in the 60s. Yep, nothing new in this world. Yeah, Chaos Project, fancy website. Throw the link into the chat. Basically, it's health metrics for open source software. Okay, and it's mostly applied to how healthy are these projects we're potentially ingesting. Is this something that's looking good? Does it have weaknesses? If so, what weaknesses might we need to watch to prevent catastrophic security failures or the project simply running out of development steam? Now that's an interesting project. They're very numbers orientated for obvious reasons. And they have, for instance, a data scientist working with them and all of that kind of stuff. Now, what we've done in capability modeling, we make process standards. So our capability modeling isn't about metrics, it's about the process points to manage organizational engagement with using open source, using it from a compliance perspective with licensing, using it from a compliance perspective with security assurance. But it seems like a natural collaboration that if an organization is improving internal processes, they might want to have a process point to check external health of the open source that they're going to play with. So yeah, that's a conversation that just kicked off. And I wanted to get your feel about if you think that's something that intuitively looks like a good match for organizational maturity modeling around open source and a good thing for us to play more with. So this is just an informal question. How do you feel about that?
Hey Shane, this is Casey here. I joined late, so I apologize. And first time joining, actually.
Welcome.
To OpenChain, yeah, thanks for having me. Finally, got a break in my schedule here. I like the idea personally. I don't know a lot about the Chaos project, but I think there's good synergy there
Yeah.
from what I can see. So I like it. I like the idea.
Yeah, and it might be useful, I guess. One thing that comes up is how do we know what's good beyond licensing?
And again, I don't know a lot, so if this is already covered, I apologize, especially for some of the other folks on the call. But how is the project distinct from from security, I guess, because it seems to pull that in a little bit, right?
Mhm.
From a health perspective, is that what it's doing?
A lot of what Chaos is doing is looking at the metrics of project momentum, like contributor numbers, contributor volume. Um, does the project have the type of structural things that you'd expect? For instance, does it have DCOs for contribution? Does it have clear licensing? So it's more of a holistic, how's this project looking? And aspects of that are relevant to security, aspects of it are purely relevant to, let's say, development momentum and health. So it's a multi-tiered approach, but it's not going to be a deep dive into security. More deep dives would be things like what we see in OpenSSF as they start to look at how you assess project security health. But let's say overall, it's an overall snapshotting.
So, Shane, it sounds interesting. Can you give a bit more of idea of what kind of scope? Do you mean specifically related to capability modeling of communities? For example,
Yes.
giving them a score and like giving them hints like must have SPDX headers on everything and it gets you up to the next level. Is that kind of the sort of thing you mean?
Oh, well, this is a great question. And because I like to keep everything totally secret in the OpenChain project, I'm just going to share my screen on the email about this. What, just this, Chris, never get me security clearance anywhere, okay?
The yeah, the one thing I was going to bring up with that you brought to mind is Martin, I think it's when you asked the question about having SPDX nomenclature everywhere for the licensing. The rascally folks that are in charge of the Linux operating system, the kernel, you know what they're doing? They're hashing the SPDX notifiers on the software, and they're just putting the hashes in there now. So in order to figure out what the license is, you have to go interpret the hash. And I about blew my mind because that's very contrary to the reason for even accepting the SPDX nomenclature for a license.
Yeah. Wow. Okay,
Yeah,
let's.
perhaps I shouldn't have mentioned SPDX as an example. Anyway,
Yeah. Sorry.
Well, no, it's good. It's a weird thing they're doing with hashes. It's just adding another step, it seems, for us, but okay. So with this proposal regarding, let's say, chaos, it does project metrics. And this is my email back on the idea to Stephen, who's from Orcro. And they're behind, or Stephen and Andrew are behind the maturity modeling. Their company and KPMG, no, not KPMG, my apologies. Deloitte built out the maturity model and came up, what if chaos metrics were added into the mix? And I said that it's interesting. There's really two things happening, an organization dealing with internal matters and an organization dealing with external. And our capability model is internal. It's about leveling up internal process management. And chaos is basically external. It's about how's this project we might engage with doing. So it's two different things. And the question is, um, typo. Yeah, not typo. It's good. The question is how to tell a story that would explain the utility of doing both without making it seem like a dependency. In other words, you could do purely internal or purely external or both and mix and match. So long story short, Martin, I think it's really a question of assessment. We help companies assess internally their processes, and Chaos helps with external assessment. Maybe we can expand our maturity modeling to reference them. If you're looking at external project health assessment, here's a project and here's the type of metrics that can help you to do that at different levels of fidelity. Does that make sense?
yes, I think so. So you're targeted towards our community, if you like, not the hosting project.
Yeah, I'd
Yeah, so I
say.
think we've already got some kind of guidance or template process for assessing communities anyway, I think, although I think it's very old. So I guess it's partly an update of that and bringing in some of the capability modeling into that, I guess. Sounds
It,
interesting anyway.
If this,
there's
I'm sorry, Shane, go ahead.
no, Casey, go ahead.
I was just, and again, I'm coming in a little bit late on this. It's, if I'm understanding correctly, are the metrics like what makes good published? Like what
Yeah,
are the actual metrics?
right. And this is something Martin mentioned, and I'm just trying to find the scorecard document.
Okay.
So, okay, there was
Yeah,
a
if you
scorecard which is now maintained by OpenSSF, but the link that was put in our chat about it no longer looks as pretty as it used to. It used to have a nice diagram. But basically, there's a scorecard that talks about what a project is doing. And that scorecard allows you to see how well the project is doing X or Y. And I can't be totally sure that the link I've got here covers the entire scorecard. This seems to be this is a security-focused scorecard that was put into our chat as the link by the visitor from OpenSSF. But you can see tier requirements, and these scorecards can be publicly displayed. On the top of my head, I don't have the link to the fancy version of this, but there is a more fancy version that shows, projects meet 73% of the requirements for the scorecard of project health, and that type of
So,
stuff.
so is it like the Carnegie Mellon maturity model? Okay.
Very similar. Very similar. And it came out of the older days, in open source, when open source just didn't have that much being applied to it. Nowadays, Chris, as we've discussed before, we're kind of moving towards normal software asset management here. So, we could say that we might even be in a transition where all of these scorecards will eventually evolve into or fall by the wayside if there's more generic scorecards. And we're in the transition point and helping with the lift to get there.
Yeah, so Casey, it would be like Red Hat would adopt this metrics to use with their software development.
Mhm.
And so they would set up and score each one of the ratings that are set out as to where they are within that metric. And then the scorecard just reports all the metrics and gives you a total look at how your organization is doing. It wouldn't probably work too well for individual developer in GitHub that's just writing one application and they're in and out.
That's what I was wondering, like the intent.
I got it.
Okay.
By that I mean I got the website with the fancy stuff.
Okay.
So this is their scorecard at OpenSSF, which has refocused entirely, it seems now, on security. Used to be a scorecard that covered general project health and then was merged into OpenSSF and now seems to be refocused on security. The older version would cover more stuff. And essentially, it's a way to automate checking of project health in this scorecard.
Mm-hmm.
And Chaos has other ways of doing that type of automated health check for projects in a more general sense. Yeah. It seems that what we have is OpenSSF of something cool. We see something cool coming from Chaos where they do their metrics. I'll pull that up as well.
Just
Right.
a question, like, for example, the OpenSSF, the scorecard, does it, or do you remember if it takes into account at all, I don't know, diversity of the maintainers, etc., or is it really just about security? Because
So it looks
that's
like
a kind of clear difference between what Chaos is doing and the OpenSSF with the scorecard.
Right. The OpenSSF thing came from CII best practices, which seems to have been depreciated, or it's still functional. I'm pulling up something to see if there's still anything on this. Okay. Nope. That's not the right one. Okay, so basically the OpenSSF thing comes from a best practices badging for how projects run. Focus now is entirely on security. Before that, it was on how the project set up, blah, blah, blah. But now it's entirely security. Meanwhile, Chaos covers a much broader set of metrics. Things like diversity of people in potentially geography. I think Chaos also can look at gender and so on as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so again, this is more of a self-reporting.
Yeah, there's some analysis that can be done on the software side where there's a dashboard and it can read into things like GitHub, as far as I remember, to pull up analytics.
Yeah,
But
it does like real analytics of the project basically.
yeah,
Meaning if I want to go out and consume a project out of GitHub, I can use this myself if the,
yep,
okay.
yeah. So here we can look at, I just put the link in the chat to this.
Okay.
Let's, we can pick up a project and it'll start pulling a dashboard about who's in there, pull requests, commits, mailing lists, and it just pulls up as much data as it can get. And I guess depending on the fidelity of things like authors, you can start digging into, who are these authors, where are they from, and even further than that, if the data is in the platform.
This is really nice. I like
Yeah.
it personally.
yeah.
I think it's really helpful for actually several different reasons.
Yeah, absolutely. And potentially this type of analytics, and if we combine it with OpenSSF for security, if we look at that, it could easily fit into maturity modeling to say like, well, example, if your project has one contributor, it's probably a red flag.
Mhm.
If it doesn't have security practices, red flag. And here's one way you can check it over there, etc.
You can also use it not foolproof, but I have a trade compliance background as well. You can use it a little bit for trade compliance reasons.
Yeah, probably indeed.
Mhm.
And maybe in future areas, like, we're entering a period where things are getting a tad tense geographically, and
Right.
questions might come up about geographic diversity of contributors. One thing that came up, I was in the EU recently, and policymakers were very interested in open source, but also interested in what projects would European companies be participating in, for example. And at some point, policy guidance could say, if you're based in Japan, try to use projects that have at least a percentage of Japanese contributors, so that in this geography, there's the capability to continue using that project, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah,
Yep,
to me, this is really nice.
that's pretty cool, isn't it?
Yeah, I like it.
And I have to give credit, the company listed up here, Bitergia, they're based in Spain, and the email I casually shared up here has Daniel, he's the CEO in CC. So, they've kind of leaned into this and they're providing that dashboard to the community to help people get those analytics running without having to do any setup on their own, which is super cool. But this is all open source, by the way. People can run it on their own as well.
Hmm.
Yeah. Okay. So hypothetically, then, I'm just going to pull up my original slide.
So,
Hypothetically, yeah.
so let me ask you a leading question. Since you
Mhm.
said it's all open source and anybody can use it, how do we know we've got the right to use that software? Have they subscribed to uh, our open source software licensing process?
Yeah. Yep. I think here we go.
Okay,
It's just on GitHub. Yeah.
excellent.
There you go. I just put the link in the chat. So yeah, the software is just on GitHub, so you can download it and run with it. Yeah, which is pretty cool. Advantage, stuff available. Disadvantage, have to set up. Advantage, there's a web version, so you don't have to set up if you don't want to. So that's nice. Yeah, but I mean, that leading question was vitally important. If there was something to help open source that's proprietary, that doesn't mean it's available in perpetuity. I mean, it's available for now.
Right. There's been a
Yeah.
lot of things that were free and open source for a while, and then they became closed source.
Mhm.
Right. And that's a disaster in supply chain management because we can't do anything quickly. We're multi-year activity here. So, yeah. I always say to people, as we think about stuff in OpenChain, we have to think about the fact with our ISO standards and stuff like that, we're moving tens of thousands of companies. So whenever we start doing something, we're looking at a 3 to 5 year window for that oil tanker to turn. So it's very important that stuff will be around. Speaking of, I have something cool. The tooling work group, which has been running for at least 40,000 years, is going to have a massive event in Stuttgart, April 7th to 9th. And this OpenChain and Friends event will be held in collaboration with the local government. Basically, we're in the hometown of companies like Bosch and Mercedes, and they use a ton of open source tooling for open source compliance. And a lot of that is really good. The disadvantage is that it takes some technical expertise to set it up. So they're going to sit down and talk through open source business management and automation and the stuff that's available to do that and tutorials on how to do it. So super, super practical stuff. And it's building on previous work. For example, they made a tooling capabilities map some years back. And this map allows you in these fields, which are on the screen, to start saying project A or proprietary solution A covers these areas and not these. So for instance, clearly defined as in this example, clearly defined as a package crawler and a package data repo. It's not going to help you with dependency analysis or policy and rules. And this capability map is a way to kind of try and frame the information of what have we got here, how will it help us? And I don't want to bore everyone by digging too much into the details on this, but a quick example, this is the capability map. It has these topics of what they're doing, what comes next, open questions. The map itself is this white space. There's a test version for security underway. And then they have various tools like binary analysis, next generation. What was that? Oh, software heritage, turn, clearly defined, trust source, and scan OSS. And they show what these tools can do. And they're currently focused on the open source tools for open source compliance, but I'm also leaning on proprietary vendors to say, why don't you put yourself in this capability map so people can see what your solution does? So that's an interesting one, I think.
That
Tooling
would
work,
be a godsend for people that are buying their software to use in the industry.
right? And to be completely frank, even without a leading question, I think if we map all the open source stuff, it becomes a huge pressure point for proprietary vendors to do the same.
Yeah, I think it'd be interesting to map the other way round as well, right, from a capability to the tools. But it's all good stuff.
And
Yeah,
Martin, last time we discussed, a little bit about this mapping that, should go both ways.
Good. And I'm planning to go to Stuttgart. Or say planning, I'm confirmed to go.
yep. Well, this is it. They're going to have this big meeting. A lot of it will be introduction, tutorials, but I think the capability model will be a serious topic for how do we tie the threads together. And the update started last week in their online meeting. So I'm hoping that their capability map for tooling will become a bigger topic in Q2. And as Chris said, it could be a bit of a godsend as a quick cheat sheet of what do we need to fill out the gaps. So that's nice. Right, we're heading towards the end of the call. So the future standards topic, what are your thoughts on expanding? We have two sister standards, license compliance and security assurance. Security assurance, I know Casey's first call. I'll just flag it for that reason and for other people watching the recording that are coming in. Security assurance in our case is currently focused on known vulnerabilities. We've talked about expanding it in the future to other areas. We started with known vulnerabilities because that's the biggest elephant in the room. So we have two sister standards for open source process management, one on licensing, one on security. Should we explore doing more? And that's a question which I touched on earlier. Our board will be talking about this next week about, do we look at doing a spec in SBOM quality management in the supply chain? Do we look at doing more? Or do we think maybe we don't want to do more standards? The two sister standards are enough. Do you have any thoughts on this? Is there anything that you have an opinion on this topic?
I have one idea.
Yep.
Risk management. It kind of touches the security, but it's a little bit different.
Ooh.
And that kind of gets to the previous discussion about chaos as well.
Right. And of course that includes things like, have you checked your CRA compliance? Have you checked your NTIA compliance, et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah, and it just what is your risk? I don't know, posture and the projects one is using for I don't know applications, and then what's the health or I think if you think about the chaos, that what's the
Right.
health and how do you ensure that your risk levels are not getting out of your whatever comfort zone in your organization. So and I don't know, like earlier there was a project A, but now that project A seems to be abandoned. How do you fix that? Do you have process to fix that? Kind of similar but bit different.
Right.
I don't know if that makes sense.
Oh, no, it does. I was just looking, I was just doing a quick check for how traditional software asset management runs with risk. It seems that there's a lot in software asset management around risk. It seems a lot of this comes from providers like ServiceNow or Deloitte or similar, as opposed to a unified approach. Chris, your hand is up, and you probably know more about a unified approach than anyone else on this call.
Hmm. Nah, what I was thinking about was on your first question about the two sister standards for open source process management compliance,
Mm-hmm.
and should we explore more? And I'm thinking that we probably ought to have some serious discussions around uh, comparing and contrasting the two SBOM guides to see
Right.
if there's some room to consolidate those, because I think that the open source community really needs to have kind of a unified vision of, regardless of what format SBOM tool they want to use, what are the content items that you want to have in there so that people are going to be more willing to use your software because they value your transparency of what's in there,
Makes a
both
lot
from
of
a
sense.
security sense and a licensing standpoint.
And
could
sorry.
that be a little push to the SCA, providers as well?
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. There was a parable told to me by a person who's now retired used to work at BT. And back in the day, there used to be um, explicit like magazines about choosing refrigerators because so many variables. This is obviously he was around a long time ago. There were so many variables in buying a refrigerator. It was like buying a new car until everything became so standardized and equivalent that nowadays we basically choose on a few features and price. When it comes to software bill of materials, we seem to have this proliferation of so many areas where bombs are in play. And maybe all that will get unified into nice simple approaches and guides in the future. So, strategy subcommittee discussion points. They'll in general discuss more standards or not, but I'm going to specifically bring two things from this call. The AI bomb compliance guide and the Telco SBOM quality guide. A comparative analysis. Could this stuff be one unified guide and one approach to dealing with all of this? And that could go a lot further than us. It goes into other areas like mainframe. It could even go as far as whatever software bill of materials you're doing, here's the framework approach to address it. Nothing is special. Everything is approachable with one mindset. So that's one point. Second point, risk management, open source risk management as a potential for guides or standards. And that would be the high level. So looking at in general, how do you start to de-risk open source software in your org? What are the steps you need? And it comes down again to policy, process, training, responsible people, and a few action points as usual. So those two, can we combine bomb guides into one approach? Can we help the market that way? And point two, what about general risk management? We're dealing with licensing, we're dealing with security, but is there an overarching approach to risk management that could be given as guidance for open source and even potentially a future standard? Does that capture the thoughts?
Pretty well, I think.
Okie
Or very
dokie.
well.
I'll take very well. It's 2:30
Yeah.
a.m. I'm going to take a very well for that. All right. Those are the two things I'm going to bring to them uh, to trying to look forward to making stuff better.
And I think that one thing that you can just kind of remind them of, and I'm sure they're all aware of it at some level, is that open source and private source, we'll just call it that, are starting to merge anyway.
Right.
There's becoming such a large percentage of vendor software packages now that are actually open source software that I'm on a crusade to get a requirement that all vendors produce a SBOM that actually defines all of the open source software that's in there from both standpoints, software licensing and software vulnerability. And if you've
Right.
got vulnerabilities, what are the highs and the mediums and criticals and what have you done to mitigate it in your software if it needs mitigation?
Absolutely. I think we're entering, just as you said, a point where we're going to have a hybrid world. And some companies have always been there. Apple is a great example. They're mixing BSD code with uh, other code and proprietary code, and they have really good control of their stack. It looks like everyone everywhere will be having all types of code. Yeah. So the more commonalities in managing this, the better. Okie dokie. We're just about at time. Is there any other business that you'd like to raise for this particular call? All right. If not, then it's time to close the meeting. Thank you, everyone, for a very productive meeting today. Well,
Thank you,
Well, it
Shane.
was
Have a
very,
good night.
Thanks,
yes,
bye, everyone.
sleep well.
I will indeed. These next 4 hours will be a blissful pause. Take care, all.
Thank you.
Shane. Thanks,
Bye-bye.
everyone.
Bye-bye.